Welcome in, listeners. This is Margin Mavens, a podcast hosted by Steph and Kayla, where we share our thoughts on all things literature. Today's episode is about Witchkiller by Ashlee Latimer, a dark retelling of the story of Hansel and Gretel, where Hansel is not quite the hero he portrays himself to be. Now make sure to grab a snack and a drink. Unless you're driving, then remember 10 and 2 and come hang out with us while we dive in. Listeners, it's just me again. You're welcome. I'm here today with Ashlee. I read Witchkiller. I loved it. I would very much like to know how it came to be. Like, how did you decide you were going to write this amazing retelling of Hansel and Gretel?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad that you really liked it. It came about in kind of a roundabout way. My editor, Talia, and I were working on a totally different project. It was a fairy tale retelling, but it was for middle grade. It was completely different tone, like princesses, and still like dealing with some like smash the patriarchy stuff, but in a much more like lighthearted way. And that project ended up not working out. And so we ended up developing this, and Talia gave me kind of a few initial threads to go on. And then I just ran with it and developed what we now know as Witchkiller.
Amazing. What does your writing process look like?
I feel like I'm still finding my process. I feel like the only consistent thing is that every book that I've drafted has been different. Witchkiller is technically the, I think, 7th or 8th full novel that I've written. The others are in like various stages of completion. But for this one, I had a really, really in-depth outline that I got approved by my editor before going in. So that was definitely a little bit different. I've always been a more like I like to outline at least a few things, but this really had like beat by beat. But we ended up changing significant portions of it after the first draft. So it was not a full rewrite, but definitely a huge overhaul in a lot of ways. And so that was very different as well. But right now, the project that I'm working on, I found that I like working with an outline. So my version of a zero draft is just going through and really doing an in-depth version of telling myself the story. So it's just kind of like narrating like this happens, but in a really specific beat by beat way. And I'll like tell myself like, okay, this is what these characters are going through emotionally. This is what the conversation will look like. This is what the setting looks like. And when I started, I would definitely just like throw a few plot moments down and then like go off to the races. I definitely used to subscribe to the idea of, just get to the end and then go back. And I found that now, at least from a structural standpoint, I really need to know like, okay, yes, this part of the structure is still working for me to move forward. And if not, I'll stop and figure it out and then move forward.
Did you find any difficulties as you were writing Witchkiller? I mean, you said that it was practically a rewrite. So how many like edits did it go through? Like how much did you chop? How much did you keep?
Yeah, I rewrote about half of it.
Okay.
One of the biggest things that had to be redone is originally there was this conceit of this magical storybook that Gretel found. And she also had like much more severe amnesia in the original version. And so I had to kind of scrap all of that and really rework the framework for how she ended up in the situation that she did and how the book would end. So that was I got rid of like half of what I originally wrote and added that half back plus about like 20,000 more words, 15, 20, something like that. And we went through all told, I think five drafts. And then before like past pages. So
would you consider that to be a lot?
No,
as far as drafts are?
I feel like Talia and I were really able to work super efficiently with each other because we were very communicative throughout the process. So even we had a couple of calls while I was in the midst of different, like during the first draft, we had a call while I was in the middle of that. And then during the second one, we had another call. And I think that made it feel like it was just moving forward. It didn't feel like I was doing the same work every time,
Right.
if that makes sense.
It
So
felt a little different each time.
yeah, definitely. It felt like each draft we were like getting closer to where we wanted to be. So I love revising. I don't love drafting. I have a theater background, and I
Okay.
feel like drafting for me also feels like when I'm blocking as a director,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when you like decide all of the initial staging of the
Right.
show. And if anyone who's ever worked with me as an actor happens to be listening to this, I know they are laughing because I will like block a show and then change most of it. But I just like getting something down and then working with it.
Right. You like having the
Um,
foundation and then building something on top.
exactly.
Gotcha. 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 What sort of inspirations like did you pull from? I mean, we all know Hansel and Gretel is like this fairy tale that we've heard so many times in so many different ways over the course of our lifetimes. So, did you pull a lot from that? Did you go a little sideways and pull from something else? Like, I'd love to know more about like your influences.
Yeah, I mean the original fairy tale definitely was a source of inspiration, and in addition to just kind of some of the basic pieces of the original fairy tale, there
Mm-hmm.
are little, well, literal breadcrumbs woven in. The first version did not have any breadcrumb references, and I was talking to one of my best friends about that, and he was like, "You can't do breadcrumbs." And there ended up being like another reason to work those in. And so
Mm-hmm.
I did, but I later told him, I was like, okay, don't worry, the breadcrumbs are in there. So that definitely was a source, but I really pulled on, I wanted the setting to feel very fairy tale in the sense that it's sort of out of time and place. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's loosely based in a time period and a geographical area, but not a strictly real one.
Yes.
The way that I framed it for Talia was like, I was like, you know, when Netflix makes Christmas movies and it's like the royals of Yugoslavia, and you're like, okay, like we're kind of in Europe, but so I pulled not only from a little bit from Germany, but then also like I'm from East Tennessee.
Okay.
And so I pulled a lot of the setting and the community, and specifically the witchcraft in the book is pulled a lot from like Appalachian traditions.
Uh-huh.
I'm like a first generation Southerner. All my family is, my mom's side of the family, which is like the family that I grew up with, is from Montana and South Dakota, like that area, and very heavily Irish Catholic. Like my grandparents grew up in one of the most like densely populated Irish American towns in the country. And then my dad's side of the family is from Minnesota, but I didn't really like spend a lot of time with them growing up. So
Right.
I'm like mostly influenced by my mom's, but my grandparents did both come from mining families. So there is
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of like overlap, and then also not like my accent is all over the place because it's like been influenced by being here, but then by being raised by them, and like I call soda pop, like
Right.
things like that. But I feel very influenced particularly by the nature here in East Tennessee, and like I
Mm-hmm.
can see the Smokies from just outside my door, and like that's always been a huge influence. And so, and also the culture of like hospitality and community is
Right.
definitely something that I pulled from. And there's a book called Backwoods Witchcraft, which that author is a many generations Appalachian, and like pulled a lot from like his family's uh, history of how they practice craft and whatnot. And so that definitely was a huge influence. But then again, I wanted it to still have that fairy tale aspect where it's like all of these things, but with a little bit of a
Yes.
twist.
A smidge of magic, like
Yeah.
a smidge of the prince. I was a fan of the prince in this story.
Oh,
But we'll get
yeah.
into that. We'll get into that in a little bit. Is there anything that you have learned from writing Witchkiller that surprised you
Ooh.
at all? Whether that's the writing process that I know you mentioned you do better with an outline now, like anything or like surprised you about your writing outside of that?
Yeah, I remain surprised by how dark I can go as a writer. um, that's as a person, like that's very much not my brand. I don't think that many people would have expected me to write something this dark. And even I posted a snippet the other day, and one of my friends commented on it, and he was like, "I don't know why I'm surprised it's this intense given the title, but here we are." Uh, so yeah, I think that that's definitely something that has surprised me. That's probably the biggest thing. I feel like I think I also was pleasantly surprised by how able I was to just toss things out and like
Right.
let things go if they weren't serving the story. I've never been super precious about my darlings, but I've also never done as wholesale of a rewrite on something as I did with that between the first and second drafts of this.
Did you find that you had to fight really hard to keep one thing in that you really wanted, or was it like you didn't really have to fight, you kind of had more power to make those choices?
No, I feel really lucky that my editor and I, like, we've always been on the exact same page. And there were a couple of notes that she gave me after the first draft where I was like, I agree with this and I have no idea how I'm going to figure it out. But then as soon as we talked about it, we pretty quickly found a way to make it happen. One of the things I could talk more later where we're doing spoilers, but it's like a
Yeah.
huge piece of the book. So I don't want to reveal what that was. But yeah, no, I just feel like it's been such an incredible experience. And I think there was one thing where my editor asked to move a certain event up further in the timeline. And I did move it up, but not quite to where she mentioned it. I was like, I'm going to split this note into two pieces. And I was like, one piece is up this early. The other, I just like couldn't make it until like just a little bit later.
Right.
But yeah, it's always been very, very, very collaborative. I think that also coming from theater really helps with that because I'm used
Yes.
to working as a team. And, you know, when you're putting a show together, you're dealing with very practical elements of, well, you may want the lights to look this way, but this is how they
Right.
show up on the costumes. And
Right.
we can't remake a dress as quickly as we can change a light cue and things like that.
Do you have any advice or suggestions for like people who want to break out into writing, especially writing like fairy tale retellings?
I would say, specifically with fairy tale retellings, find the piece of the fairy tale that feels like most personal to you and build from there. I've been fairly open that one of the cornerstones for Witchkiller for me was pulling from my experiences growing up in an abusive household. And my direct experience was very, very different from Gretel's in a lot of ways, but the emotional center of that was something that I pulled on. And that was the thing that I really latched on to immediately when I first started working on this project. And I think that finding that personal center is what can help you tell a story that's already been told so many different times, so many different ways, and come up with like a fresh way to approach it.
You do a very great job with that in Witchkiller, to the point where sometimes I would forget that it would be about Hansel and Gretel, and I'd just be like sitting there cheering Gretel on in whatever terrible decision she wanted to make. Like, yes, slay, queen, please, please. Okay, we can get into spoilers now, listeners. Witchkiller does not come out until October of this year.
Yes,
Okay.
October 7th.
So don't know when this is airing. If it's airing before October 7th, just put a pin right here and then come back to it after you read the book. So it starts off very clear, like Gretel has killed the witch, like, and Hansel is taking the credit for it because women aren't believed to be strong enough to be doing that, and it's very important that they keep this secret. And it's just a really interesting dynamic between brother and sister because you feel like Gretel still wants the brother that she had, and you can't understand where the disconnect happened because she can't remember, Was the decision to have her kind of forget what happened, like, was that one of the first decisions made? Was that something you decided, like, along the way?
Yeah, that was one of the first decisions we made. And it was always rooted in the different impact that trauma can have
Mm-hmm.
on people, and um, memory loss or the revision of a memory is so common, whether permanent or temporary.
Right.
So that was always the root of it. And once upon a time, there was this other layer of magic. And that was the big thing that we ended up changing, where like, originally I had it where Gretel was like under this curse that had made
Mm-hmm.
her forget. And she had been stuck in this story over and over again until she could figure out how to like change the story. And there were
Right.
just so many other obstacles that Gretel has to get through that it ended up feeling like there wasn't enough runway for her to
Right.
also have to work through this. And we wanted her to have some information instead of it being like every time she wakes up at the beginning of this story
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't know and has to relearn all of these things. So that was when we shifted it to she remembers everything since the sorry to say accident. It's not an accident. Since the conflict, the confrontation, as it were. But she doesn't remember everything that happened around that day, and
Mm-hmm.
her memories leading up to it are fuzzy.
Still fuzzy. Yeah. The prince, was
Yeah.
he always, is it Willifred or Wilfried?
Wilfried. Wilfried.
Wilfried. Okay. Was he always part of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, gosh, I'd have to look back. He was like so immediately part of it that I can't even remember if he was like in the very initial thing that Talia sent me or if I just like, but he immediately showed up. I always knew that there was going to be this dynamic between him, and Katerina also was always there. And so I wanted it to be Gretel's pulled between these two worlds in more ways than one.
Yes. I loved it. I love, not to skip all the way ahead, but the ending I loved, because I was like, oh, like, I was going to be happy whether Gretel stayed with the prince or not. But then seeing her go home, because really the witch's village became her home. It became where she felt the most safe. So seeing that was really heartwarming, I guess would be the word for
God,
that.
I'm glad.
Was that like always the intent? Was the ending always going to be she picks
Yes.
safety in the village?
Yes. The intent was always for her to choose them ultimately. However, in the first draft, we didn't get to spend as much time in the village. This is another thing that taking away the whole curse subplot opened up space for us to spend more time with Katerina and in Galwin with the other witches. So it could really feel like an actual choice that Gretel had to make. Because one of the things that my editor and I talked about was we didn't want it to feel like either choice was unsafe or unfamiliar, but where could she best make choices for her future, and like where did she want to go the most. And because she starts out as a character, as a person who doesn't get to make almost any of the choices about her life, I really wanted her at the end to go where she would have the most freedom to write her own story, as it were. But I did also want it to be a choice for her, and to not, I personally, like, I love romantic entanglements of all kinds. But I feel like sometimes the choice feels pretty clear. And I feel like oftentimes the struggle of the choice will really actually be between readers, because they will prefer one love interest over the other. Whereas it seems pretty like narratively clear for the character, like which is going to serve them best. And so I really wanted it to be tough for her. And I also wanted her to have to wrestle with, like, I held myself back from really like enjoying Wilfried and wanting this relationship. And like, I wouldn't let they'll feel those feelings, and to have to kind of grapple with the regret of, oh, I really could have enjoyed this to its full. And I tried to design it that way for the reader too. Like everybody that I've talked to while they're reading it so far has been like, I swear if he turns out to be bad.
Oh, I was like, oh no, he's gonna turn his back on her, and it's gonna be terrible and awful.
And
I
that was what
appreciate
I
the
hoped would be.
decision to keep him not like that, to keep him this sweet little naive baby of,
Yeah.
trying,
I like
wanting to
him.
make the world better, but not fully understanding what it would take to make the
Totally.
world better. And I like that Gretel really stood by like her convictions. Like, no, we can do this. You just have to have have to have the courage to do it.
Yeah.
There's a really great messaging in there for kids, in my opinion, especially teenagers. Teenagers could read this book and walk away with a lot of great messaging.
Thank you.
The Queen, surprise, she is a witch.
She is.
Didn't see that coming. I was like, whoa, back up. I thought maybe like Wilfried and Katerina were like BFFs, like, and he had like that direct line to that. And no,
Mhm.
no, it wasn't. It wasn't him. It was the Queen. It was
It
the
was one
Queen.
generation back.
I love that. What was the thought process behind that? Like, how did you want to incorporate the Queen into the story and sort of lean more on her being that link rather than Wilfried?
Yeah, I really wanted to explore the idea of a character who goes from being on the outside. There are a lot of parallels between the Queen and Gretel. They
Mm-hmm.
both are originally commoners. They've moved into the nobility. Gretel
Mm-hmm.
thinks she's going to be becoming part of the monarchy. And I really wanted to explore and play around with the idea of how do you change the system once you have consigned yourself to being a part of it.
Right.
And obviously, in our political system, elected
Mm-hmm.
officials can step back from that at any time and change their approach to trying to make the world better or worse, depending on who they are. But in a monarchy, you're locked in.
You are,
It's
yes.
Yeah, especially if you are directly in line to the throne. Obviously, like uh, Prince Harry and Meghan have shown that like it is possible to get out of
Mm-hmm.
that, but it's really
Mm-hmm.
difficult. And I wanted to look at, so when you've consigned yourself to being a part of this system, how do you fight from within? But then, like, how does that limit you? And even though we don't have a ton of time to explore everything
Mm-hmm.
that's going on for the Queen, I did want to like show that she's lost like vital parts of herself and had to give
Right.
up things in order to try to wage this battle from the other side. But it's meant being cut off from her proverbial sisters and like her
Right.
community and her closest friends, both for their safety and hers. And um, I felt like that was a really important lens for Gretel to be able to look through, because the Queen, in a lot of ways, foreshadows what that path would be for
For
Gretel,
Gretel, yes.
especially because we've been told that the king also was like pretty progressive minded and
Mm-hmm.
like wanted to make reforms in the kingdom and did. Bureaucracy at that level, it's very slow going. And I
Yes.
wanted Gretel to have this like tangible example of, if you choose to go about the fight this way,
Right.
this is what your future will look like. You will only be able to move at this glacial pace.
Right.
Can you resign yourself to that?
And she decides she can't,
Right.
right? Because then she makes the decision to basically take the fight to her father and her brother by becoming the witch in the woods,
Yes.
which was just chef's kiss. So good. I'm so
Thank
glad that she
you.
had the opportunity to just sort of like deal with her father and brother in the manner that they ought to have been dealt.
Me
Um,
too.
yeah, it was very, very, very good. Was it cathartic for you at all
Yes,
to write that scene?
definitely. There are a lot of men I've encountered that I wish could have to face fairy tale
Hmm.
level rules. And I think, I mean, outside of like what she actually does to them, I think just her getting the opportunity to say, like, like, and show that she is taking charge of her life and
Yes.
that she's no longer going to be under their thumb and bound by their rules, and also a chance for her to show them that they severely underestimated her.
Yes.
I think, like, yeah, that all was just very, like, very cathartic. And when I first wrote that scene, it was at the beginning of 2024, and
Mhm.
my editor and I have had some conversations in the past year and a half about how it's not like when I first wrote this that I was like, oh, this is going to be completely irrelevant by any means.
Mhm.
But particularly as we got into the summer of last year and I was like working on the second revision, I was like, we're moving towards good
Yeah.
things. And
Mhm.
um, we just seemed poised for a very different time then than we are now living in, which I think has a lot of parallels
Yeah.
to how the summer of 2016 felt. And and so there were moments where I was like, oh, is this going to feel trite or passe or like unneeded? And then flash forward to I got my line edits 2 days
Yeah.
after the election.
Yeah.
Um, and they're just, I both wish that this felt less of the moment, and
Mhm.
also, like, when I was going back through and seeing like lines like where Hansel says like your life is my choice, and the way that that was just like a chilling
Mhm.
parallel to like your body my choice, all those months after I first wrote it, like things like that
Yeah.
have just made me even more glad that this story is down and that I wrote it when I did before I knew what was coming.
Right. Right. Because it definitely feels a lot like how every book, especially for teenagers, especially
Mm-hmm.
even more for teenage girls, how it should be with, the girl sort of that feminist, like, rah rah, I'm gonna do what's best for me. I don't necessarily care what society thinks is best for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just fighting against that and reading that as an adult with everything else going on. And like, I was just like, yes, please just burn it all to the ground. Like, burn it all to the ground. I support this. I think you could burn the entire world to the ground. I would still support you. I support women's rights and wrongs. I am very grateful that you wrote the book that you did, that
Thank
you wrote
you.
the scene that you did. I think even if it did feel trite, it is never not appropriate in any scenario until we all have equal rights. So
Yeah,
like, thank you for doing that.
thank you.
On a completely different note, because I have to know,
Sure.
Katerina and Gretel,
Yes.
do they smoochy at some point?
Yes. So I had a very late bioawakening. So in the sense that, like, when I was in high school in
Mm-hmm.
particular, I didn't even know being bi was an option. And like the
Mm-hmm.
funny thing is, I was kissing girls at that time, but I was like, this is just what people do sometimes. Like, I only knew that I wasn't a lesbian because I was like, unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
been like I have known that I liked boys for a long time. That was like kind of, so I was like, well, I know I'm not a lesbian, and like that it's lesbian or straight, like that's all there is.
Mm-hmm.
So so it was like, I actually realized I was gender fluid before I really like clocked that I was bi, like, which feels very like reverse of how I imagine people would think it would go, but
It feels so accurate it hurts, if I'm being honest with you.
and so I definitely pulled a lot from there when writing both like Gretel's journey and then also their journey together, because in the beginning, like, Gretel doesn't even have the framework for recognizing that like what she could be feeling for Katerina like could be in any way comparable to what she's feeling for Wilfred, or what she's trying not to feel for Wilfred. And so I just wanted that to have a gentle, natural progression. And I also like, things are still different down here in a lot of ways from other, I don't know where you are in the country.
I'm in the Northeast, so I get it. Yeah.
And I know that like I've worked with kids for like 15 years in directing and teaching capacity. And I know that there are kids around me having similar journeys to this, where it's like, they didn't know since they were like small. And, you know, I wanted to give them room, but yes, they definitely, like, they are in the future, whether their future will ever be like committed to an official page or not, but like, they are together. Once upon a time, there was an epilogue that like flashes forward 2 years later, and you see that like they have transformed the Henneth Castle into a school and a like place, a transitional place for women and girls coming from various kinds of difficult situations, who may not immediately find themselves out in Galwin, but need somewhere along the way. And so yes, I can confidently say they're together.
Why not in the book? Why no epilogue? Wait, hold on. We're not just going to roll past that. What happened?
The epilogue was told through a very definitive lens of like what would happen immediately next, and how like Wilfried's story would have progressed as well. And I just wanted to leave a little bit more of a door for myself in case there is ever a possibility to continue their story in an official capacity. But if we get down the road and it's like, no, Witchkiller is going to be a true standalone, I will probably release the epilogue that says
that's fair, I guess. I would love to read just like a story about that, though. Like just them coming together and creating a safe space for women and girls, women and children, to like find their way after hard and traumatizing times.
Yeah, I will keep that in my back pocket as I'll send important people this and be like, see, readers want it.
You should. I want it. I want it. If you're listening, I want it. I need it. Me. Orlantha.
Yes.
What an interesting character.
She is.
I adore her. She's just like this fun. She reminds me of like a fun older aunt that just sort of like does her own thing and lives her own life and knows all the things, but doesn't tell you all the things, but like, except on a random like 3 a.m. drinking binge and drinks some more, you know? Like, what was writing her like?
It was interesting because she's such a foil to the queen in so many ways. They obviously were besties growing up, and have gone in totally different directions, but are still looking out for each other from afar. And in the way that the queen was one vision of like, this is what your future could look like, I really wanted Orlantha to be like the other direction. And I think ultimately, at least in my imagination, Gretel's future looks like a combination, because Orlantha obviously, well, as is implied, like, she doesn't have a partner. She's raising Katerina on her own and is really kind of like helping raise a lot of
The little
the
ones,
children in
yeah.
Galway, like in community, and I imagine that Gretel and Katerina will be together forever. But so yeah, I wanted Gretel to kind of be able to pull from both of those, but I did want to offer this vision of a future where it's like Orlantha is living so diametrically opposed to everything about the
Yes.
society that Gretel has been raised in and raised to believe like this is what you're supposed to do. And I wanted to give her a complete alternative of like, what if you made every choice in direct contrast to that? So she would kind of have these two extremes in some ways. I mean,
Yes.
the queen also is like, yes, she's very much walking the path that is similar to what a lot of women are expected, but she also is
Mm-hmm.
in a position of power that's unique, although she doesn't have total power.
Right.
So yeah, and I it was also really important to me that Orlantha be someone who would provide Gretel with information that she needed, but not try to pretend she has all the answers, and
Mm-hmm.
not try to just hand down a path for Gretel to follow, because I think that that is something that Gretel has to learn as well, as like it's not just about finding one checklist. I grew up very much in a religious culture where it was like, this is what you're supposed to do. And when I
Mm-hmm.
was first deconstructing and coming out of that, I felt like I, for years, was seeking like, okay, what's the, like, I'm not going to do this, but like, what's the other checklist? Like, who can give me like a gold star in this other
Right.
version
Right.
of adulthood? And so it was really important to me that Orlantha not do that. And in some ways, I pulled that from, I have a very incredible therapist who I've been working with for years. And as is appropriate for her line of work, like she, she often is like helping me find like information, but like never gives me
Yeah.
the like, direct answers. And
Yep.
particularly in that scene where Gretel's deciding to go back to Galway with
Mm-hmm.
Orlantha, and it, you know, it would have been so easy for Orlantha to say, like, of course your mom would have supported this. Like, of course she would have, you know, been cheering you on. And I had to really like fight that instinct to get her
Right.
to say like and admit like she didn't know Gretel's mom well enough to know if she would approve or what she would have wanted. She did know that she wanted Gretel to live, and that
Right.
means making her own choices.
Ugh, it's such a good story, y'all. It's such a good story. It's so good. And it's a really great reminder that there's no right or wrong way necessarily to live. You live your life the best that you can with the resources you have.
Mm-hmm.
All that to say, it's still eat the rich. Um, there are wrong ways to live if you're a billionaire.
Yes.
But for us little people, no.
There are lots of rights.
There's lots of rights. Build your community is probably number one on that list.
Mm-hmm.
So this, I don't have anything else. So this is your opportunity to talk your talk, promote the book, promote what you're working on, your socials, all of the good stuff.
Yeah, Witchkiller comes out October 7th, which just happens to be my birthday, which I think is so fun. And I had nothing to do with that. It was just a fun surprise from Scholastic.
Yeah.
I do feel like I maybe manifested it a little bit, because when I realized my birthday was on a Tuesday this year, I knew the book was coming out in the fall, and I was like, could happen.
October would be a good month.
So yeah, October 7th, it'll be out everywhere. You can pre-order it right now. If you go to Buy Witchkiller, well, you can pre-order it or order it, depending on when this comes out. Go to buywitchkiller.com. It has all the links to all of the places you're pre-ordering. I will be doing signed and personalized copies from Union Ave Books. It's like the first button on that website, so easy to find. But all the other places are there as well. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Ashlee Lauren Nicole. My mom gave me the alternate spelling of all of those. So it's ASHLEELAURYNNICHOLE. And yeah, I talk a lot about the book, but also about other stuff that I love and other books I'm reading on there. So
what are you reading right now?
I am almost finished with this book called Eldorado Drive. I'm reading it for book club. It's like a
Ooh.
thriller about a kind of like an MLM Ponzi
Oh,
scheme thing
nice.
for women. It's very dark. It takes place like in like 2009, so it's dealing with
Okay.
all of the economic collapse that was going on back
Yeah.
then. And then I'm also reading Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. It's my first time reading her
Nice.
books, and I love it so far. And then I'm reading Spectacular Things, which is about two sisters and their mom. It's going about like 50 pages in, and it's kind of hopping between their mom when she was a young adult, and then now they are young adults. So.
Ooh. Also, we love multi-book reading at the same time.
I
That is a thing that happens over here
love
often.
that.
Um, okay, I don't have anything else. Is there anything, any last minute things you would like to say before anything we didn't mention?
I don't think so. I feel like you had really thorough questions, so thank you.
Thank you. All right, listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode, for supporting us. Please make sure you go show Ashlee some love, both by reading the book, ordering the book, whatever you need to do to support Witchkiller, because it is a genuinely good, solid novel. Remember to go follow us on Instagram. I don't have my outro script, so we're just vibing with this. Follow us at Instagram at Margin Mavens. All of the important links will be below the video. You already know the deal. Thank you so much. We will catch you in the next episode.